Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we continue to recap the Eagles' 20-10 loss to the New Orleans Saints. Stock up, stock down, coming your way.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcoming Eagles fans to a Tuesday edition of the show. It's brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. We are going to continue to recap the Eagles' 20-10 loss to the New Orleans Saints. They had yet another opportunity to get the number 1 seed and clinch the NFC East, but the Eagles made it difficult, as they normally do pretty much every year at this time of year. And it's going to be a Week 18 do-or-die matchup against the New York Giants, to clinch, although considering they might be playing all their backups, the talent level might be that of, who the Jets are throwing out there right now, and, at quarterback and, at running back and the offensive side of the football. So, but, overall, man, you could really feel the frustration of Philadelphia yesterday, because it just felt like a huge blown opportunity. Not that we really truly believe they'd lose to the Giants backups this coming Sunday, but the frustration is just that it shouldn't have gotten to this point, and it's really because of things that they're doing to themselves versus what other teams are doing.
Right. And I think first things first, Dallas and the Saints did enough to beat the Philadelphia Eagles, and rightfully so. The Saints in that game were playing like they had something to play for, that they had an outside chance to get into the playoffs, and it looked like they capitalized on the situation, which the score shows that they did. The Eagles, once again, failed to do that. But let's lay the landscape of what is to be in Week 18. And currently, betonline.net has the Eagles as 13-point favorites. So Vegas would indicate that the Giants, who are locked into that 6 seed, quite literally have nothing to play for. They have no reason to put their starters out there to get them hurt, where they most likely are going to have to go on the road and either play Minnesota or San Fran. You're going to want to be 100% healthy. Take no risks at all to get anybody hurt. So the Eagles are going to go into this game most likely having to play starters in a do-or-die situation. And right now, even with that Minnesota loss yesterday, what has to happen is as simple as the Philadelphia Eagles winning this football game, because there's an outside chance that Dallas can lose and San Fran can lose, but you need to win, because there are cases, Lou, and I went through all of the different simulations yesterday. Even if the Eagles, let's say they do lose this game, Dallas loses, but San Fran wins, they'll get in, they'll win the NFC East, but the Eagles will be the 2 seed. So even if Dallas slips up, you happen to make it out of this game with a loss.
And I'm not going to feel good anyway, Gino, if that happens, because basically then you'd be thinking, oh my gosh, if the Cowboys didn't find a way to blow it against Washington, and Dallas does that a lot, so definitely there is a chance. But even if that happened, it's like, if it was up to the Eagles, they'd be on the road as the 5 seed. That would be, to me, just as frustrating, even if they did get it done.
Absolutely so. And what it comes down to is getting it done, getting the 1 seed, and traveling through Philadelphia in the playoffs. Because right now, if you look at the landscape of the NFC, we know absolutely nothing as it stands. We know one thing, that the Eagles, when they play their best, can beat anybody in the NFC. If you look at the landscape, they've beaten Dallas one time, they've beaten the Giants, they've beaten Minnesota, they've beaten 3 teams that are in the playoffs currently right now. Next week, they have a chance to have beaten another team where Detroit and Green Bay are essentially playing for a chance to go. It looks like Jacksonville and Tennessee are fighting it out in the NFC or the AFC South for a chance to get to the playoffs. The Eagles have beaten very good teams when they play top caliber football. But if they play like they had played the last 2 weeks and against Washington, they're susceptible to losing in this NFC, where at any given day, heck, Green Bay, they might be the best team in the NFC as it stands with how they're playing. They blew Minnesota out of the water. They were a team that took advantage of what is in front of them. And if they beat Detroit, they're in the playoffs. And
that's
teams
what
like
I was
that,
saying.
that's
this
scary,
week,
Lou. That's like the 2008 Eagles. They just got in. You needed a chance, and they got hot at the right time.
And they have the back-to-back MVP at quarterback and Aaron Rodgers. It's why the other day I ranked them as the number one team that I don't want to see in the divisional
I'm falling
round.
into that trap with you right now. I agree.
I'd rather play Tampa Bay. I'd rather play Dallas. I'd pretty much rather play anybody right now outside of Green Bay. And they gave the Eagles a huge test on Sunday Night Football in that, shootout. So on prime time. So yeah, Green Bay definitely on fire. The Eagles just need to take care of business. Gino, the good news is, again, the Giants have pretty much nothing to play for as a 6th seed unless they want to play spoiler. They're not going to risk having Saquon Barkley get hurt, though, or Daniel Jones for that. And the other good news is, although the Eagles have thrown us in these stressful situations a lot throughout our fandom, especially in the 2000s, they normally do come out on top, right? Like when they need a win to clinch something, if it's to make the playoffs, to win the division, to get the number 1 seed. You look at like 2008, they beat Dallas. 2009 was a different story, but like 2013, do or die, you beat Dallas to win the division. 2018, you got to go on that run and win out to make the playoffs. They did it. 2019, same thing. They did it again. Even last year in 2021, you have that pretty much do or die matchup against Washington to make the wild card, and they got that done in a close game as well. So the good news is the Giants are sitting their starters. The Eagles have the best roster still in football, and they've been that the entire year, and they normally take advantage of these, high pressure situations.
We had said it on Monday's show, that every time it comes down to sweating out an Eagles season, more than likely they come out on top. And is this a position that anybody wanted to be in for it to come down to this? No. But one, Lou, we have to look at the landscape of the NFC. This is a dang good conference right now. It's much higher than the expectations that I think a lot of people had put on it prior to the season.
And what it looks like throughout the majority of the season.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But you're looking at it right now. I don't think anybody thought Minnesota was going to be as good as they are. Nobody thought Detroit could get on this run. Seattle would have a chance to be fighting for that back end in the playoffs. You got 3 NFC East teams. The Eagles are fighting for this division in the year where it is the best that it has been in nearly a decade or two. So they have a chance to put up the biggest season in franchise history with 14 wins. They would move to 14-3. They've never done that before. They would lock up the 1 seed. They would lock up the NFC East. They would only have to play 2 games to get to the Super Bowl. The recipe is there. We have seen what you have to do to get to the Super Bowl in the early 2000s. In the mid 2010s, rather, we saw what it takes to just get to the playoffs, and then we finally saw what it took to get over that hump. And what it's going to take for the Eagles to get over that hump is to hold themselves accountable, fix their mistakes, and move on to next week and leave no questions and no stone unturned. Empty that playbook. It doesn't matter if you're going against their backups. Get out to a 28-point lead and let it be one of those games where we sit back at halftime and we're saying, okay, we can focus on.
We can finally relax, even if it's for a half an hour as we watch the second half. Totally with you. The Eagles got to get done the win on Sunday to win the division and get the number 1 seed. We're going to continue to recap, though, the game that didn't happen this past Sunday against the New Orleans Saints. Stock up, stock down, coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks Daily Fantasy. If you bet on the Eagles this week with Prize Picks, the over, it probably didn't work out for you. So here how Prize Picks works. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they're going to score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry, and there's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projection available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport you watch. Of course, the NFL, college football, bowl season. We got the national championship coming up, the NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA Tour, college football, like I said, and college basketball, WNBA, esports, combat sports, you name it. It's all available at Prize Picks. Safe and fast withdrawals, currently operational as well in over 30 states and Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. So if you deposit $100, Prize Picks is going to give you $100. If you deposit $50, they'll give you $50. Don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. This is the Locked On Eagles podcast. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. Thank you for making Locked On Eagles your first listen every day. Subscribe as well to the Locked On NFL podcast and get daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories, plus in-depth analysis on the biggest games with key NFL predictions every Friday. And Monday, local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL available on YouTube and wherever you get your shows. On today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we are going to do stock up, stock down after the 20-10 loss to New Orleans on Sunday. And Gino, I do want to start with stock down because this was a very frustrating game. It was a blown opportunity to clinch the 1 seed in the division. And although you got to give credit to the Saints, they played like their season was on the line because it very much was. And of course, the win wasn't good enough for them as Tampa Bay eliminated them from the division race. But the Saints definitely played a great game, and they knew the exact strategy of how to beat Philadelphia. But at the same time, it felt like the Eagles beat themselves again, and that's been the case anytime this year they've struggled. And the coaching staff has got to be where we start, and it's where we started yesterday. Stock down to the coaching staff. Dude, it really felt like their game plan was as if they had their full starting lineup in there. We're not going to change anything. We can come into this game against an inferior opponent with our base schemes. We're not going to change it up at all based on our personnel, based on what our opponent does. And we're going to mop the Saints by 40. It really felt like just a lazy vanilla game plan. Like they didn't really take this seriously and what the stakes were. And they thought they could get by with the talent they had. And of course, the execution wasn't great, but considering the injuries they had on both sides of the ball, you needed more from your coaching staff. And, you got it in the second half adjustments, but as we said, it was too little too late.
It seriously was one of those games where you're saying they probably didn't take this seriously Monday through Saturday. It was kind of an overlooked game. And why should that have been? I don't know. It was puzzling. And looking at the situational performance, Lou, I think it comes down to just basic things. Let's look at first down run versus pass. New Orleans, they had 10 first down passes and 8 first down runs. The Eagles, they had 9 first down passes and 2 first down runs. You're coming out there and throwing 9 times on first down. Why? You have Gardner Minshew or Miles Sanders. Who do I trust more with the ball in their hand? Let's give Miles the ball on first down where he's picking up 5 yards. We could get to 2nd and 5. We could get to 3rd and short. It was right off the bat. They were putting themselves behind the sticks. It was so Chip Kelly-esque. It reminded me of 2013, 14, and 15, where a team goes down, they control the ball for 9 minutes, and you're saying, okay, we got to give our defense a break here. Those guys just played their rear end off. They're on the field for over half a quarter, and then what happens? 3 and out. What happens after that? 3 and out again. Because they put themselves behind the 8 ball. They didn't make it easy for Minshew. They didn't make it easy for themselves. And they were thinking plays over players. That's not like what they thought,
it almost seemed like they thought Jalen Hurts was the quarterback and Kenny Gainwell was in at running back and Lane Johnson was in at right tackle. The reality is you have Jack Driscoll at right tackle and you have Gardner Minshew in at quarterback. So why would the plan be to be so pass heavy against the number 2 ranked passing defense in the NFL? Yes, was Miles Sanders banged up? Sure. But as you mentioned, he was averaging 5 to 6 yards every time he touched the football. That game plan from the start was puzzling, and it took them until, halfway through the 3rd quarter for them to adjust. And by that point, the penalties started and everything else. Turnovers.
There were some concerning moments in the first couple drives where you're just sitting there and saying, why is this the game plan? And I look at, I believe it's the first or second play of the game where they have an overload on the left side with multiple tight ends lined up to the left of Jordan Mailata. And on the other side, it's Jack Driscoll on an island
with Cam Jordan,
and Kenny Gainwell in pass protection, who is not good in pass protection. And you're saying, why? Why are they doing this? Why are they making it difficult on themselves? Take away the best defensive player. Don't let him ruin your game, and then try and figure it out from there. They just said, yeah, we think we could beat anybody with the guys that we have. And in reality, Minshew isn't Jalen Hurts. When Minshew has a good plan, we have seen it succeed. Even last week against Dallas, you saw some success with how they were going about that game plan to a point where you scored 4 touchdowns on offense. So you have to sit back and say, what did we do wrong? It is clear that they didn't put their guys in the best position to succeed. And you have to do that as a coaching staff this late into a season where injuries are going to be prominent. Mistakes are going to happen, but it's how you overcome them. You can't use them as excuses. I know Daryl Johnston on the broadcast, he was excellent yesterday, and then they asked him, like, what do you think happened? He's like, oh, there were a lot of key injuries. I'm like, man, that's not the answer. That's a lazy excuse.
Yep.
We've seen injuries before. You won a Super Bowl without
and they still had
Hall of Fame
way
left
more talent than the Saints had.
Absolutely.
They had way more talent, and they did not play to the personnel that they had and the opponent that they had on both sides of the football. Again, Jonathan Gannon was coaching like he was playing Patrick Mahomes and as if he had Bradley Fletcher and Byron Maxwell on the outsides instead of James Bradbury and Darius Slay. But
here's another one, Lou.
That's the same thing we've been saying for years. Yeah.
Special teams, we got to talk about this as well, where there's a punt from the Saints, right? And it bounces and they tap it out of the end zone. So in that situation, once a Saints player taps the ball, you can recover it. And even if you fumble it, it doesn't matter. The ball will go back to where it was first touched. Zach McPherson is standing there just sitting, waiting for 4 guys to down the ball at the 1 yard line where he could have just picked that ball up and potentially gotten some yards out of it. It's things like that. You got outcoached. You were outcoached in every single phase.
Yeah, how many times did the Eagles start at 10 and then New Orleans started at their own 42?
Right,
versus the Eagles were always backed up.
That killed you, Lou, because if you field that punt and you at least get to the 15, right, then you could punt that ball out of there. Turn around. Brett Kern has a horrendous punt. Field position battle. It changes. The Saints go down. They get points out of that because you couldn't get out of your own end because of coaching things and things that should be taught Monday through Saturday.
Coaching and situational football definitely stock down after Sunday's loss to the Saints. And, Gino, I'm frustrated too. Stock down to A.J. Brown. I know that he had, 97 yards and he had that 76-yard touchdown to really put them back in that game. Only down at that point, 3 points? But I was frustrated by his comments in the press conference after the game where he threw Gardner Minshew under the bus. Was he correct? Yes. He was talking about how he knew that route had to change. He was trying to get Gardner Minshew to see him pre-snap. Didn't happen. Marshon Lattimore knew what was coming. And of course, Minshew still throws the ball anyway, stares it down, and Lattimore has a pick 6 and it really puts the game on ice. But to me, I was frustrated that A.J. Brown pretty much said, well, Minshew didn't figure it out. I couldn't get his attention, so it was an interception. Basically saying like Jalen Hurts wouldn't have did that. But to me, if you're A.J. Brown, who barely was walking through that route, if I'm A.J. Brown and I know my quarterback isn't getting this read right, I know this opposing all-star cornerback has this figured out, and this snap is still going to happen, and I see Minshew staring me down, I'm running even harder to try to break that play up to try to beat Lattimore to that spot. And instead, A.J. Brown pretty much, it felt like pre-snap, threw his hands up in the air and said, well, Minshew couldn't figure it out, so this is about to be a bad play, and just like gave up. And I'm, again, I know it was on Minshew a lot, but to me, the lack of accountability and just basically saying, well, it was the backup, it couldn't have been me. That's frustrating. That's 2 weeks in a row where Darius Slay kind of did the same thing. Was it maybe Josiah Scott's fault? Sure, but I mean, stop throwing backups under the bus when you're all-stars on both sides of the football.
That is one thing that this coaching staff, going back to coaching, has to hone in on, and that's holding everybody accountable. The standard is the standard, let's say. That is one thing that is preached at every level of football. And one thing that is just accepted is that you push your best players harder than somebody that might not step up to that caliber. So you're going to push an A.J. Brown more than you push a Josiah Scott and so on and so forth. But those little things like stopping your route. Oh, you see A.J. Brown do that. Why do you think Quez Watkins is okay doing that? Why do you think that's like acceptable? Oh, because the top guy's not doing it. I don't have to do that. Oh, you could throw him under the bus, Darius Slay. I could throw him under the bus. That's things that keeps a good team from getting to that great level. And I'm with you, Lou. You don't say that. You keep that in-house. You own up, said, yep, I should have ran that route a little harder. We move on. Nobody's even talking about it, right? But
and again, we know he's correct, and we know A.J. Brown isn't a Jalen Reagor, typical lazy player, but in that spot, you're the star of the offense. Take the fall.
Yeah, you have to approach it like Devonte Smith. That's why I do love that the guys that they're bringing in, man. Like, you're bringing in Alabama type guys, great leadership that are young, that will displace the older leadership at some point. And
that's why it's more frustrating this happened 2 weeks in a row, because I feel like this team has been so good at, taking on accountability compared to past teams.
Well, the thing is, Lou, you're going to find out who this team really is. This is where you find out what that team is, right? When you have to fight and grind through adversity, you find out if this good team just wants to stay good and they want to fit in that 80%, that middle, that average category, or do you want to get to that 10%? This is where you have to own up and buckle up and say, okay, I got to step up and practice. I got to run this route harder. Get ready for next Sunday. Get ready for the playoffs because, like you said in Monday's show, what's going to happen when you have to adjust and you're playing these teams with Justin Jefferson and you're going to have to adjust against cornerbacks that are way better. And I'm looking at the AFC and you look at just all of these teams which have all-star caliber defenses. And what happens if you play Buffalo, Lou? What's going to happen? That team that flies all over the defense and you stop your route. Oh, they're taking it back, brother. They're going to take that thing to the house. This is the time where you have to step up in those little moments when nobody else is stepping up. You have to do it because everybody else thinks somebody else is going to do it. It's you who has to step up and do it. And A.J. Brown, that was one of those moments where you want to see him take that next step to that leadership role.
Totally agree. Gino, there were some positives in this game on both sides of the ball that we can build off of. So we'll get into that coming up next. Stock up, stock down right here on Locked On Eagles.
But before we get into stock up, stock down, this show is brought to you by our friends over at betonline.net. It is the number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Every single week, every Friday, we are putting in our LOE3 bets. We pick 3 player props from their vast library of player props that you can even create. And the thing is, if you don't like NFL, which why you would be listening to this podcast, it would be puzzling. But if you like other sports as well, basketball, you got the big 4 in Philadelphia. You could always bet on Joel Embiid getting blocks, getting rebounds. You could bet on club soccer is back now. NHL is going on. We got college basketball, both men and women's going on. We're also going to have some more football coming up here with the national championship, NFL playoffs. You're going to have the XFL, USFL to bet on soon as well. There's only one place you can do that. It's over at betonline.net, the official sports book of the Locked On Eagles podcast and the entire Locked On Podcast Network. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, this is a Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. It's stock up, stock down after a 20-10 loss on Sunday to the New Orleans Saints. The Eagles need one win. They have 1 week to do it to clinch up the number 1 seed and the NFC East Division Championship. Obviously, Gino, the coaching staff failed epically against New Orleans. You know, the situational football in all 3 phases. A.J. Brown didn't step up and take accountability. There's definitely a lot of stock downs that we could talk about. When it comes to the positives of this game, I mean, the one good thing is this was maybe, stock up to the defensive line, I think this was perhaps the best pass rushing performance, and there's been some amazing ones throughout our time as Eagles fans. This might have been the most dominating performance, even in a historic year, from Hassan Reddick, what he did with another 2-sack performance, Brandon Graham with 2 sacks, Javon Hargrave gets a sack, Fletcher Cox was everywhere yesterday or on Sunday, and he gets another sack, his 7th of the year. It was maybe the best performance I've seen from an Eagles defensive line when it comes to getting to a quarterback.
And the best part about that, Lou, was the adversity that unit overcame. Josh Sweat goes down immediately. Great news on the Josh Sweat front. Per source of himself, said that he will be playing this year. I mean,
that's good news,
we thought he could have been dubbed for the season. Hats off that he's healthy above everything else.
And that's huge because you already don't have Robert Quinn, Gino, and it's like Patrick Johnson is going to be your 3rd guy off the bench.
Let's get Kyron Johnson out there, baby. Get some athleticism on the field. But he will be back. But shout out to those guys that stepped up, man. That was one of those performances where we look back to March and you sign Hassan and you're saying, when's that game going to come, right? When is that situation going to be where nothing is going right? And it just comes down to say, guys, we are way more physical. We're way better when it comes to our pass rush plan and arsenal. We have experienced guys in BG and Fletch. We have Javon Hargrave, who nobody can handle this season. Hassan is just playing out of his mind, and everybody stepped up to the plate, Lou. They came to play when it mattered. They got bullied a little bit on that first drive. They got pushed back, allowed that touchdown. But after that, Lou, they didn't allow a touchdown the rest of the game. Yeah, they were all over Andy Dalton. They put that Saints offense in some precarious situations where they're in 3rd and longs and they're having to resort to screen plays where you could just rally to the ball and keep everything underneath. And that was the defense that came at the hands of that defensive line where you're saying, man, if everything does go wrong, we just got the guys that are going to go out there and bully them. And we need to sign a petition, get Brandon Graham a pension, The second the guy hangs it up, he should never have to pay for anything in the city of Philadelphia. He should have his everything covered, health insurance, cover it all, because the way he stepped up, Lou, after an Achilles injury to set a career high and get to double-digit sacks, Lou. You got to double-digit sacks.
I know, it's awesome. And not just him, man.
I get so freaking round of applause, man.
I get so pumped, too, just seeing him and Fletcher Cox thrive right now, because, again, we've mentioned this before in the show, but the roles that they took on this year as more rotational pieces when they were the heartbeat of this defense for a decade plus, to see them totally embrace Hassan Riddick coming in and starting over him, and Josh Sweat as well, and Fletcher Cox sees Javon Hargrave come in, and then Jordan Davis is a first round selection, and Milton Williams is, stepping up for sure too. He had another sack yesterday. He's got 4, and that wasn't a huge spot on third down. But to see, I get more pumped for Graham and Cox, because they've been with us through all of these eras, and now to take on this rotational veteran role and to have the best years they've had in Brandon Graham ever, and Fletcher Cox in at least 3 or 4 seasons. Cox is at 7 sacks in his own right with a game to go. I'm just so pumped for those guys, but everybody stepped up. I mean, Hassan Riddick, Gino, he has a sack in 8 straight games and has 2 sacks in each of the last 3 games. If you compare him to Reggie White, who might be the best pass rusher ever, even Reggie White never had a streak like this. Reggie White's longest sack streak was 7 games. So Hassan Riddick, what he's doing, I mean, Defensive Player of the Year candidate. I think you have to talk about it.
This team is 4 sacks away from matching the 85 Bears.
Yeah, this might be the greatest pass rushing unit in NFL history. I mean, that's insane.
We got to give them their credit. They were playing at a shorter schedule, though, but things weren't going so hot for the Eagles' defensive front at first, Lou. I mean, it took them a little bit to get going there, and when they've put it together, they have been the dominant force there, and it's just a collection of everybody doing their job up front and nobody really caring about who gets the numbers, because everybody is eating. It's like the
everybody has
Golden
the numbers,
State Warriors, Lou, of this 2016 and 17. And when they signed Kevin Durant, you're like, what? Who's gonna score these points? Well, guess what? Everybody is getting theirs, and it's kind of like the wide receiver position with Dallas Goedert as well, where Miles, Dallas, AJ, Devontae, they're all eating. It just depends what day. Who's going to get up to the
fun box
line
score here, man. I mean, the Eagles are the first team in NFL history with 4 players that have at least 10 sacks. They also have the longest streak ever in NFL history when it comes to 6+ sack games. They've had 6+ sacks in 5 straight games. I mean, just on a historic roll, and they're only like you said, 4 away from tying the record.
Yeah, they would have to have 5 next game to set the record.
Just an incredible amount of depth and top tier talent up front. So stock up definitely to the defensive line. The really only reason they had a chance to win that game in the second half. And then, Gino, as well, stock up to our guy, wide receiver DeVonte Smith, who made some really tough catches. I mean, that's the one thing you notice, not the only thing, but you look at Gardner Minshew and the accuracy versus where Jalen Hurts was. It's on another planet, where Jalen is compared to Gardner. And DeVonte Smith has had to make some incredibly tough catches for Minshew, and he's done it the last 2 weeks. Another 100-yard performance with 9 catches on the day. He has 3 straight games with 100 yards. In 4 of the last 5 games, he surpassed that number. I mean, maybe it shouldn't surprise you because he's a former Heisman winner, but he's been on even a bigger tear these past, 5 games than A.J. Brown has.
He's been the only one where everything that he has done the last couple weeks has been to the whistle.
Yeah, there's no hiccups. There's no fumble. There's no bad route. I mean, DeVonte is, he's probably the most consistent player you have when it comes to skill position.
You know what was the best play, I think, from DeVonte? It wasn't flashy, but it was key. You're in that 3rd down, and it was the one where they went to review to see if he got the forward progress on it or not.
What a catch.
The maturity and the mental understanding to know where the sticks are, to give yourself enough room to finish your route and then to come back and attack the ball, which has been a weakness for these
Which was thrown behind DeVonte, and he had Marshon Lattimore
got the first down
over him. Yeah.
And he still got the first down because he knew what to do. He played through the ball. Marshon Lattimore was on him, who, when DeVonte was on Marshon, Lou, it was a completely different ball game than from when AJ was on him. I would say right now, I trust DeVonte Smith more than anybody on this offense outside of Jalen Hurts at this current point in time. Miles Sanders, he's had a couple fumbles. I mean, you've seen Quez Watkins have a fumble. AJ Brown has had a couple. DeVonte doesn't do anything wrong. And he
doesn't.
is 165 freaking pounds, and he's dominating guys that just outweigh him. And there's some times he's up in the air and he gets hit and he flips around and falls on his head, and then he gets right back up and he's in there the next drive. And the last play of the half, he gets smoked and he's limping to the sidelines. Well, guess what? Comes out and puts over 100 once again.
Yeah, he's
because
tough, man.
he is the embodiment of a Philadelphia Eagle. Everything you could have asked for in this young man to be is not just a player, but an off-the-field leader. You talk about the defensive line giving you a chance in a bunch of these games to continue to win. Without Devonte Smith, Lou, you might not have 13 wins. Just
the definition
with
of making your quarterback look better. I mean, these last 2 weeks.
If you just have AJ, yeah, you'll win some games. But it's that combination, man. Those two are deadly, and Devonte Smith is a 1A receiver any day of the week. Give the kid
totally agree. He's in the same tier with A.J. Brown, if you ask me, and he's shown that the last month and a half. That's going to do it, guys, for today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got 3 more shows for you Monday through Friday. We have a podcast for you on all podcast platforms, on YouTube as well, and make sure you hit us up on Twitter. Let us know what you think of the current state of the Birds, at Locked On Birds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you the local insight you love to the national spotlight with daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your shows. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off for this edition of Locked On Eagles. As always, thank you for downloading, thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.